Pennywise loses every 27 years, but he always wins. The Losers Club defeats him in 1958, again in 1985. In the films, they do it in 1989 and 2019. And now, with Welcome to Derry, we're seeing what happened in the cycle before the Losers, the 1960s. Different victims, different traumas, different faces, same pattern. Each time, Pennywise is reduced to nothing, shrinking, starving, dead. But he isn't, because 27 years later, he's back, stronger, hungrier, feeding on a new generation that has no idea what's waiting for them. So here's the real question. What if losing isn't a failure? What if it's the entire strategy? Spoilers ahead. Pennywise isn't a clown. He's not even a creature. He's fear given form. And fear doesn't just want to scare you. It wants you to run. That's the mechanism. When Georgie sees a clown in the drain, he's curious, nervous, but not running. Pennywise escalates. He shows teeth. He lunges. And in that moment, Georgie's fear spikes, and Pennywise feeds. The kill is a meal. The fear is a feast. This is why he doesn't just appear and attack. He toys with you. He becomes your dead brother, your abusive father, the disease you think will kill you, the secret you've been hiding. He builds the fear, step by step, because the longer you're afraid, the stronger he gets. And the second you run, he's already won. But here's what makes this truly disturbing. It's not random. Pennywise doesn't just scare people. He targets the fear you've been avoiding your entire life. Welcome to Derry shows us this pattern in the 1960 cycle. Different decade, different people, but the same psychological mechanism. The victims in the 60s aren't just scared. They're haunted by something they refuse to face. A parent they couldn't stand up to, a trauma they buried, a shame they've been carrying in silence. One victim is terrified of abandonment, so Pennywise becomes a parent who left. Another is drowning in guilt over his sibling's death. So Pennywise becomes that sibling, asking why they didn't save them. Another carries the weight of a secret. Something they did, something they hide. And Pennywise turns that secret into a living nightmare. It's the same thing he does to the losers decades later. The same thing he'll do in every cycle. Because Pennywise doesn't create fear. He finds what's already there, what you've buried, what you refuse to look at. And he makes you look. Now let's jump to the 1980s. The Losers. Beverly's fear isn't blood. It's her father, the abuse she survived, the fear that she'll never escape it, that she'll always be that helpless girl in that house. Pennywise uses blood because it's her trigger, the thing she spent her whole life avoiding. Eddie's fear isn't germs. It's his mother, the suffocating control, the sickness she convinced him he had, the weakness she embedded in his mind. Pennywise becomes a leper, rotting, contagious, diseased. Everything Eddie's been running from since childhood. Bill's fear is guilt. He couldn't save Georgie. And that failure follows him everywhere. Every story he writes. Every relationship he has. So Pennywise becomes Georgie, over and over, because Bill won't forgive himself. Richie's fear, especially in the films, is invisibility. The fear that if people see who he really is, they'll reject him. So Pennywise doesn't need to become a monster for Richie. He just needs to threaten exposure. Stan's fear is chaos, the inability to understand or control what's happening. Pennywise doesn't attack Stan with a monster. He attacks him with the unknowable, the thing that can't be rationalized. Different fears, different triggers, same mechanism. Pennywise doesn't create these fears. He finds them, feeds on them, and when you run, you feed him. The ritual of Chud sounds like magic. Ancient words, burning tokens, belief as a weapon. But it's not magic. It's exposure therapy. In psychology, avoidance strengthens fear. The more you run from something, the more power it has over you. The fear grows in the dark. It becomes bigger, more terrifying, more unmanageable. But exposure, facing the thing you're afraid of, breaks the cycle. The fear doesn't disappear. It just stops controlling you. That's what happens when Beverly walks into the bathroom in her old house. Blood everywhere. Rising. drowning the room, the voice of her father echoing. And instead of running, she stands there. She looks at it, and she says, "You're not real." And it's gone. Pennywise doesn't die in that moment. He starves. Because the fear she's been feeding him her entire life just stopped. The same thing happens with Eddie. When he finally breaks his inhaler, when he stops believing he's weak, stops believing he's sick, the leper loses power. The same thing happens with Bill. When he finally lets go of Georgie, when he stops trying to rewrite the past and accepts what happened, Pennywise can't use him anymore. The ritual works the same way. It's not about belief in the ritual itself. It's about refusing to run, facing the thing, looking directly at the fear you've been avoiding. And when you do that, you stop feeding it. He doesn't die. He shrinks because you stop giving him power. So if facing your fear kills him, why does he come back every 27 years? Because people forget. This is the part Welcome to Derry makes devastatingly clear. The victims in the 1960s who survived, they left Derry. They moved on. They started families, built careers, lived entire lives. And slowly, over the years, the memory faded. Not because they wanted to forget, but because that's what trauma does when you stop actively managing it. It fades into the background. You avoid thinking about it. You avoid talking about it. You tell yourself it's over, it's in the past, it doesn't matter anymore. And avoidance is food. By the time the 1980s come around, no one in Derry remembers what happened in the 60s. The adults who survived are gone or silent or convince themselves it was a nightmare. The new generation, the losers, have no idea what's waiting for them. They walk into the same trap, face the same monster, fight the same battle, and then they leave. They forget, and the cycle continues. When Mike calls the losers back to Derry in 2016, most of them don't even remember what happened. Eddie doesn't remember the leper. Beverly doesn't remember the blood. Stan doesn't remember the fear that drove him to the edge. They buried it, avoided it, forgot. And Pennywise? He never forgot, because he doesn't need to remember. He just waits. 27 years, 54 years, 100 years. It doesn't matter. He knows you'll forget. He knows the next generation won't believe the last one. He knows avoidance is human nature. You don't kill a fear. You manage it. You face it again and again, every time it tries to creep back in. But when you stop managing it, when you forget to face it, it comes back. The story wants you to believe the losers kill Pennywise. But that's not what happens. What they do is refuse to run. In the final confrontation, Pennywise transforms into every fear, every trauma, every buried nightmare. And one by one, the losers stop reacting. They stop running. They face it. Beverly faces her father. Eddie faces his mother. Bill faces Georgie. Richie faces exposure. Ben faces rejection. Mike faces survivor's guilt. And Pennywise shrinks, not because they overpowered him, because they stopped feeding him. This is the same mechanism in real trauma recovery. You can't kill the memory of abuse. You can't erase the panic attack. You can't undo what happened. But you can stop letting it control you. You face it. You sit with it. You acknowledge it. And eventually, it loses its power. Not gone, just manageable. Pennywise didn't lose because they were brave. He lost because they stopped running. So what if they didn't? What if Beverly never came back to Derry? Never faced the bathroom? Never confronted her father's abuse? She keeps running, keeps dating men who hurt her, keeps repeating the same pattern, feeding the same fear, year after year. What if Eddie kept taking his pills, kept believing his mother, kept running from the idea that he was never sick, just controlled? The fear stays fed. The leper stays strong. What if Bill never forgave himself for Georgie? Kept writing stories where dead kids come back. Kept trying to rewrite the past instead of accepting it. Pennywise thrives. And here's the truly disturbing part. What if the survivors from the 1960s had stayed in Derry? What if they had kept talking about it, kept facing it, kept the memory alive? Would the losers have ever been in danger? Probably not. But they didn't. They left. They forgot. They let the next generation walk in blind. And that's the real alternate ending. Not that Pennywise gets defeated permanently, but that every generation has to fight the same battle because the last generation chose to forget. A monster that feeds on avoidance can never die in a world full of people running from themselves. And Welcome to Derry forces you to see it. This isn't a story about defeating evil. It's a story about a cycle that repeats because people refuse to break it. Different victims, different decades, same choice, face it or run. And most people run. This mechanism isn't unique to Pennywise. The Babadook works the same way. The mother refuses to face her grief over her husband's death, and the monster grows. The second she stops running from it, stops trying to suppress it, it shrinks. It doesn't disappear, but it's manageable, hereditary. The family refuses to acknowledge the grandmother's abuse, the cult, the trauma embedded in their bloodline, and it consumes them. The Shining. Jack refuses to face his alcoholism, his violence, his failures as a father. The hotel doesn't possess him. It just gives his avoidance a face. Midsummer. Danny refuses to process her family's death, her boyfriend's neglect, her own grief, and she walks straight into a cult that exploits exactly that avoidance. The mechanism repeats across every psychological horror story. Trauma you don't face doesn't disappear. It waits, it grows, and it finds a way back in. This is a pattern we see in real-world psychology. Generational trauma works the same way. The parent who survived abuse but never processed it doesn't pass down the abuse itself. They pass down the avoidance, the silence, the refusal to talk about it. And the child grows up feeling the weight of something they don't understand, something no one will name. That's what Derry is. A town built on avoidance, on silence, on forgetting. Every 27 years, the bill comes due. Pennywise isn't special. He's just efficient. So yes, Pennywise loses every 27 years. The victims in Welcome to Derry faced him in the 1960s. The losers faced him in the 1980s. Another group will face him in the 2010s. Different people, different fears. Same pattern. They face their fears. They refuse to run. They starve him. And for a moment, it works. But every time someone chooses to forget instead of face it, every time someone bears a trauma instead of sitting with it, every time someone walks away and tells themselves it's over, he's already won. Because he doesn't need to win permanently. He just needs to wait.